Hello, everyone. Welcome to Overtime. At present, where we stand is there appears to be a very large column headed towards Kiev. Let's see. Actually, I think I can get the picture of that up. Yeah, we have that. Give me 1 second. This is satellite footage of what appears to be a large force heading directly towards Kiev. They're about 40 miles out. At the rate of pace we anticipate them making contact. They're actually less than 40 miles. This was about an hour ago, so they are almost certainly less than 40 miles out. We don't know what their intention is. The intention may seem clear, and it may well be what it appears to be. But having said that, we're going to mention that there are peace talks now are on the table. We'll discuss how and why. We don't know if this is just to threaten or if they're going to, once they reach Kiev, attack. We're going to discuss that, but it is a very large, it's essentially a phalanx of Russian troops headed directly to Kiev. At last report, 40 miles out there, most certainly closer by now. You can see here all of this area directly towards Kiev is controlled. They are approaching Kiev both from the north and the west. We're going to discuss where they are right now and what we know, but assuming that force intends to attack, we're expecting considerable combat in Kiev within probably under 2 hours, assuming they attack. So we also want to discuss briefly the Russian forces, nuclear forces being put on high alert. There's obviously a lot of concern about that. The U.S. has admitted that they don't actually know what this means in practical terms. He's announced it, but we don't know really what this means. However, U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield has called the actions, quote, unacceptable. And the United States is looking for, according to her, even new and harsher measures against Russians. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has called the order aggressive and irresponsible. At present, we believe that this actually doesn't have any practical implications. He is doing this as propaganda. He is doing this in order to frighten his own people into thinking that the situation is so bad that they must trust in their government more than ever. Again, this goes back to sort of former Soviet thinking, but we believe at this point that the order is not even intended to threaten the West or terrify the West. It's really intended to direct his own people in a propaganda campaign. We do know that there is now violent protests in St. Petersburg, which is absolutely extraordinary for considering it's a totalitarian state. It's amazing. So it appears yesterday they were poised to make a serious strike at Kiev. There was some fighting around Kiev, but it looks like they actually decided instead to go primarily towards the second largest city, Kharkiv. Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm going to butcher that name until I really get it down. Let me see, actually, if I can read it here. Kharkiv. So you can see Kharkiv here is pretty well encircled. The airport purportedly is, or the airport outside, the airport inside is still under control of Ukraine. The initial reports from, I think it was AFP press, was that Kharkiv had actually, for the most part, fallen. But at this point, if it had, at least they're reporting that it is back in Ukrainian control. We do know that there was fighting in the streets over 2/3 of the city. We believe at this point that rather than continuing to attempt to take Kiev in order to bolster morale by at least having some kind of victory, Putin reorganized his forces to go straight after Kharkiv and failed. It was close, though, from what we can tell. And again, there was fighting in at least 2/3 of the city. At this point, the city appears to be completely in the control of Ukraine. We don't know if they're going to try again, but we do know that there is, as we reported before, a column headed directly towards, a very large column headed directly towards Kiev. Last night was, in fact, difficult for Ukraine. Obviously, the attacks on Kiev did dramatically slow. The tempo has slowed. A number of small towns and villages, however, have been captured and are currently under Russian control. It appears as if he's going after the smaller ones in order to just claim victory somewhere. We know that some of these are also just being completely destroyed and abandoned due to shelling. At this point, we believe almost 300,000 Ukrainians have fled the country. Okay, we'll get into those numbers in a second. Let's see. Yeah, we don't believe at this point that there's any credible risk to him actually deploying any nuclear weapons. This is ostensibly a propaganda move, really against his own people, not even designed to intimidate the West, although if it does that, that's, hey, bonus. Meanwhile, as we told you before, the sanctions here are actually much more aimed at the oligarchs, and the reason is because these are the people that have the most influence over Putin. Now, those oligarchs are a core group of supporters, most of them former KGB thugs and assassins. They support him not out of loyalty, but because he makes them money and keeps them in power, and that is now genuinely being threatened. At least 3 have come out and actively opposed this war and Putin's choices in it. That also is largely unprecedented. Let's see. Mikhail Friedman, Oleg Deripaska are 2 that have publicly and privately called for an end to the war. Deripaska took to Twitter and said that peace is the priority of negotiations and must start ASAP. That is a quote. He echoed the sentiment on Telegram, calling for peace talks to begin, quote, as fast as possible. This is his first public comment on the situation since February 21st, where he said, quote, there will be no war. Friedman has come out and said that this is a tragedy for both countries. Quote, I was born in Western Ukraine and lived there until 17. My parents are Ukrainian citizens and live in Lviv. He went on to say that this crisis will cost lives. Will cost damage in lives and will be, hold on a second. I lost the thread there. In damage to nations that have been brothers for hundreds of years. While a solution may seem frighteningly off, it can only join those whose fervor and desire is for the bloodshed to end. Putin has been privately telling the oligarchs, we're learning, that he is actually protecting the Russian people from genocide, and he has now offered peace negotiations. Originally, they were offered in Belarus. This was declined by Ukrainian President Zelensky, understandably hesitant to hold them in Belarus. Belarus is continuously firing rockets and has even today fired rockets into Ukraine. It is the staging area for the entire column that is threatening. You can see here, this is Belarus right here. And that entire column is coming out of Belarus, which declared war on Ukraine. The instant this happened, he does not want to go to Belarus and have peace talks there for obvious reasons. However, both Kiev and Moscow are reporting that they have agreed to peace talks. Thank you. Have agreed to peace talks. Let's see. Sorry, there's always got to work on that echo thing. Got to work on the backup mic, just always turning on every time I launch. It doesn't do that on. We're on a backup settings of overtime, and the settings aren't quite as good as, they're not as polished as they used to be. But the current overtime interface is just, oh boy. So at any rate, thank you for that. So they've agreed to peace talks according to both Kiev and. All right, I do apologize. All right, I'm going to need everyone to stand by one, please. I do apologize for this. All right, sincerest apologies. With any luck, the microphone situation is also. So where were we? We know now that the oligarchs. So the oligarchs are a huge part of his base. Without the oligarchs, he is done, and the oligarchs are willing to kill him. It's a different system. They operate very differently there. We've explained this once or twice. We'll get back into it. But they are now, they have agreed, according to both Kiev and Moscow, there is an agreement to peace talks at the Belarus border. There is a section of the border that isn't under Russian control, so we'll see. I'm not convinced that this isn't just another stall tactic. Putin has lied about absolutely everything to this point, and as we've said, there is a column. We're going to show this column again. This is satellite footage taken, I believe, 2 hours ago. That is a column of Russian troops headed directly to Kiev. If they've stopped, we're not aware of it. They were, at last report, 40 miles out. That report was at least an hour ago. So they could be hitting the city at any time if they choose. We don't know. What we do know is Kiev and Moscow have said that they have agreed to talks at the border with Belarus. Your guess is genuinely as good as mine. You can't trust a word Putin says. He is in very serious political trouble at this point. So he does have a desire to... he does have a desire to see a rapid end to this, if at all possible. We have learned also, so there was a third oligarch, so I've mentioned two that have now publicly said that Putin, essentially that Putin is wrong, and this has to stop immediately. And the fact that they're saying this publicly and deliberately, let me rephrase that, knowingly undermining Putin's credibility is also astonishing, and it means he is losing control of the oligarchs, which was the general purpose of the sanctions. The third oligarch, speaking on condition of anonymity, has said that it's, quote, it's going to be catastrophic in all senses for the economy, for relations with the rest of the world, and for the political situation if this continues. We believe that third oligarch is also the source of a leak at this point, which claims that Putin is furious at his military leadership, who have been telling him that the Russian military is actually, and the way this has been staged, they are not up to the task of taking any significant part of Ukraine. We have multiple reports that they are running into fuel problems. They're running into problems with food. This attack, he believed he could do in about 4 or 5 days. In fact, if you recall, that was our initial assessment, watching it go in. And at this point, having failed to do so, they were not staged for a prolonged engagement, and their supply lines are being harassed and have also been cut in some cases. Supplies that they had been anticipating to get from Germany that weren't military supplies per se, but were just sort of general supplies that could be used in the upkeep of tanks and other vehicles. All of these supplies have been cut, and apparently they are telling Putin that it will take at least 2 months to actually gear up military production to create more ammunition and supplies to supply the troops that are there. 2 months to gear up. So Putin is basically suggesting that he has been lied to, and that he has is absolutely furious and is blaming essentially the military with this. NPR is saying that they believe, or they're suggesting in an interview that they held earlier today, that, actually this was yesterday, that the attacks came in no small part due to how quickly the Taliban had successfully taken over Afghanistan after seeing the speed with which they moved across the country. Putin, they believe, and again, I think there's one of their sources on this is an anonymous oligarch leak. Putin may well have thought that he could accomplish the same thing in Ukraine that the Taliban had accomplished in Afghanistan. They also argue that, surrounded by sycophants who tell him only what he wants to hear for fear of being murdered, they over-exaggerated the capacity of their own military and of the morale, which apparently is phenomenally low. Ukrainian soldiers are reporting, and the Ukrainian government is reporting, that the soldiers they capture are ill-equipped to continue the fight and ill-prepared. So the general military consensus from both U.S. intelligence and what we're hearing from either captured soldiers or Ukraine, and let's be aware, we need to be very clear on something. As much as I'd love to believe everything that, in my view, Ukrainians are the good guys in this, period, end of discussion. However, that doesn't mean we can trust a single thing that comes out of Ukrainian military or Ukrainian government. That's not to say that it's necessarily lies, but we just have to be careful and realize it's all self-serving. There was a talk about, is the the so-called Ghost of Kiev reel. Did one pilot actually do this, or was it multiple? We don't know now. We'll find out eventually, but there's genuinely incentive for them to say that it's one guy and to try to boost morale. I have no objection to this. They have to do what they have to do, and they're fighting for their lives over there. So, yeah, they're doing propaganda too. So, so far, they seem to be reasonably reliable in what they're reporting, but the numbers of casualties that they inflict are going to be the maximum that they can defend, saying, that they believe, and for obvious reasons. So we did have a report on casualties, an unofficial report. One of them suggested, and it came out of Ukrainian government, 3,500 Russian troops either killed or injured. At this point, we don't know how accurate that is. We'll get into those numbers later tonight. We're planning a full show later tonight. This is just to update you on the column, on the talks, and what appears to be rapidly eroding support in key areas that Putin needs, including the oligarchs. Most importantly, the oligarchs. Oleg Deripaska is basically an aluminum giant. He invests in aluminum in the U.S. He is suffering dramatically from this, and his investments have been, unfortunately, targeted in key political areas, too. We are looking into that aggressively here on In Time, because I think there's some interesting connections there. So we're gonna continue to look at that. Having said that, all that notwithstanding, three major oligarchs, well, two publicly all but denounced Putin. One is apparently feeding some insider information and is clearly against Putin on this. The morale over there is apparently very, very low. However, it does look like he's going to make one more take. So again, what we believe happened last night was, while it was anticipated a major attack on Kiev, instead the attack occurred at Kharkiv. We believe this is happening because he needs to rack up some wins, even if they are minor. And that's not minor, by the way. It's the second largest city in Ukraine, but it still certainly wasn't his primary goal. It looks like there was street-to-street fighting in 2/3 of the city, but the city at this point appears to be completely in control of Ukraine, which, by the way, was also not anticipated. He sent a significant force there now. At any rate, there is a very large force headed to Kiev. He must rack up a win somewhere. All reports are that they are now undersupplied, running low on fuel, running low on ammo. The air is not yet secured against the Ukrainian Air Force, despite earlier reports. At this point, we have confidence that the Air Force is still operating. At what efficacy, we don't know, but they're operating and engaging over the skies of Ukraine. And so he's even failed to get air superiority, which was the initial goal of the Expeditionary Force when this started, was to take down anti-aircraft and anti-air positions. They struck multiple air bases, and at this point, Kiev is still operating their Air Force. Meanwhile, let's see, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell has said that the bloc is worried that this crisis will spill into neighboring countries, including Moldova, Georgia, and the Western Balkans. In Brussels today, the European Union has said it will tighten sanctions not only against Russia, but now against Belarus, and will fund weapons for Ukraine to defend itself. The aim is to spend roughly $1 billion worth of EU funds on weapons for Ukraine. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said, quote, "For the first time ever, the European Union will finance the purchase and delivery of weapons and other equipment to a country that is under attack." The European Union is saying that they're strongly considering closing its airspace to all Russian aircraft, including private jets, and especially, again, any jets, even private ones owned by the oligarchs. Once again, they're attacking the oligarchs financially and for a very deliberate purpose that we've discussed repeatedly. They have banned the Russian state news agency Sputnik and the propaganda network RT from all EU media. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken No, that's not right. Blink. Sorry, I got that's wrong. I don't have time to correct it. Has announced 4 or 5 million. 40. I'm going to slow down a sec. 54 million in humanitarian aid to be added to the 350 million in aid sent by the United States last week. The Secretary of State has said, quote, this includes the provisions of food, safe drinking water, shelter, emergency health care, and winterization and protection. Meanwhile, the White House has put in a request for an additional $6.4 billion in aid to Ukraine, with Chuck Schumer saying that that bill will be taken up in the Senate in the coming days. British Petroleum has given up its stake in Rosenfeld, the Russian oil company, at an estimated 25 billion losses for BP. This is part of a campaign at this point to economically cut off Russia, regardless of the cost to the U.S. and even to private companies. This includes the removal of Russia from SWIFT. We'll be discussing that and exactly why that works and how that works later tonight. Again, we have a whole slate of things to discuss tonight, but we wanted to go live with this column, and we figured we would add in sort of a preview of what we're going to be talking about tonight, including in particular the oligarchs and SWIFT, and what Putin's diminishing options are at this point. But what appears, I almost don't want to say it, because you say something like this and then people start to back off, and it's like, no, this is when the push needs to come harder than ever. But there's almost a light at the end of the tunnel at this point, because with the oligarchs cracking, Putin is rapidly running out of options, and so far he's failed to obtain any of the significant objectives that he had at the beginning. So again, basically, okay, oh yeah, so the, let's see, Ukrainian presidential advisor has said that he has claimed 3,500 Russian soldiers killed or wounded. We haven't verified that. That's unverifiable. But at this point, actually, the refugees appears to be over 360,000 that have fled Ukraine. A number of Russian banks which had, in fact, managed to largely get around the sanctions because they worked in key industries that were needed to supply energy to other countries, including oil and gas. They've escaped these sanctions, have now been struck by the move to block SWIFT. That actually hasn't been implemented yet, but it is being implemented. These restrictions will also impede Russia's central bank's capacity to access its international monetary reserves, meaning that Russia is going to have a very big problem now working outside of their own currency, which all the oligarchs do. It's soft currency. Nobody wants, and the country does. The country actually works in dollars if and when possible. That looks like that's no longer going to be possible. This move is being called unprecedented. Russia is the world's 11th largest economy and supplies 1/6 of all the commodities in the world, and they have now been frozen out of international markets. This is obviously triggering more inflation and more rising gas prices, but the world seems to have unanimously declared they are willing to pay that cost, which Putin had assumed they would not be. So that's where we stand. Now, I've got some messages coming in. I do need to check these messages. Sorry, stand by one. I'm going to check these messages. I'm also going to check the live chat, and we'll see sort of where things stand. I do need... we can get to that. Okay. All right, and we've got this map here. Like I said, there's a column. They are fast approaching. We wanted to let people know before. All right, stand by one. Yeah. All right. So I do have... All right. Switzerland has announced that the country will be joining the EU sanctions against Russia. This is significant, considering Switzerland has almost universally maintained a stance of neutrality, but the president of Switzerland has announced that his country will be joining the EU sanctions against Russia. Increased pressure is being deliberately applied to China, as China is the only way around sanctions that Russia has at this point. And, all right, stand by one. Jesus. All right, thank you. All right, there is a type of weapon. It's called a thermobaric weapon. The goal is actually, if I understand this weapon correctly, the goal is essentially to create a shock wave and essentially It's one of the most devastating conventional weapons. It looks like a nuclear weapon when it goes off. It's absolutely terrifying, and it's a brutal weapon at this point. Yeah, we'll get that in right now. Thank you. I don't know where this is. It looks like one of these has been deployed. What they do is the goal is to suck the oxygen out of an area so rapidly that you do it almost at a very low level what was done in Dresden, which is to just create this huge vacuum that just sucks everything in from the outside. It commits catastrophic damage and is lethal even to those well outside the range, because the sudden drop of pressure causes human lungs to collapse, does massive damage to the human body, even if you're outside the blast radius. We believe one of these has been detonated. I don't know where. We have footage that appears credible. I'm going to double check this. Hold on one second. There was talks of the deployment of this. We have not confirmed this yet. I think we're going to air it because, in my view, the likelihood that this is legit is greater than 50%, but we're not up to 80%, which is usually what we shoot for. I hope those of you who are watching, just sort of realize, and we haven't gotten everything right. We've made mistakes. We make corrections as we do. The reality is there is a very large tension here between trying to get you the most accurate information possible and get it to you as quickly as possible. I will say this, and by the way, we've often scooped, network news. I've been told we went live with this, with the invasion before any U.S. news, including anything from Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, and we've often done that. We are rapid and we rely on social media. It makes things a lot easier for us. It just means we have to double check and verify a lot more. But people who are there witnessing these events, and one of the ways, we have to have basically the very first invasion confirmed by Google traffic. We believed very strongly we had seen footage that was credible of the column coming from Crimea on the day of the invasion that was heading towards Russia. All Crimean video cameras had been cut, so we suspected at this point that the invasion was about to begin. We had footage that looked credible of the invasion force, but we couldn't verify. And then it turns out Google Maps is working in that area. Google Traffic is working in that area, and the column, roughly 4.3 miles long, as it turns out, was blocking traffic in the area, and we were able to verify that it was there through Google Traffic. Dear Lord, that's got to be a first for news. At any rate, and we went with the story, and we managed to be staying ahead of this. So at this point, I find this credible. Again, this does look like a nuclear detonation. It's not, but it's one of the most powerful. I think it may be, short of actually Moab. I think Moab may have supplanted this as the most powerful non-nuclear, so most powerful conventional weapon in existence. This is in that class. Whether or not it is the most powerful, I don't know. But we're going to play this. If this is being deployed, it's an escalation. It's a serious escalation. This weapon is completely indiscriminate.
Ох, ёб твою мать, нахуй! Давай. Ебал я его!
That's all we have. At this point, again, we believe that the chances are greater than not that that's credible. And we do know there was talk of deploying this, so we're going to report it. But please be aware right now, greater than not is about the lowest bar you can have and actually be put on air. But we believe at this point that that's reasonably credible. We're going to try to verify that. Again, we're going to do a show tonight. This is the biggest reason we're going live is that column, and that we know. That has been confirmed by Sky News. That has been confirmed by satellite imagery. That's the column right there. It is on its way to Kiev. What it's going to do there, we don't know. It seems like, well, gee, obviously they're going to attack and blow up Kiev if they can. Well, that may just be pressure for peace talks at this point, which both countries agree are now scheduled immediately at the border with Belarus. So both countries have confirmed it, but while both countries have confirmed it, Putin has lied about absolutely everything to everybody. So we don't know. We have no idea what's happening. We know there's a very large column, and if it chooses to engage, there's going to be a very serious. Kiev is looking at the hardest night of the war so far. Again, what appeared to be a very nearly successful assault on Karkiev has been repelled, and the country, that city is completely in Ukrainian hands, to the best of our understanding. But there was fighting in the streets, covering over 2/3 of the city. We do now believe that. Stand by one. I'm sorry. Okay, I lost my train of thought there. So we may, I may go back. I'll do another quick rundown. We're planning on a show to cover all of this later tonight. The biggie is the oligarchs. We've discussed that. We've discussed why that's the biggie. The fact that 3 have now broken against him too publicly is a staggering sign that this is working, and they will replace him if he does not solve this. And that doesn't mean the same thing in a democracy as it does over there. They will replace him. So, and he's fully aware of that. As I said, there's a source. We don't know what the source is, but at this point, we believe it's the third oligarch that is saying he's livid with his military and blaming them for these failures. But he's keenly aware, I think, of the position he's in. And the consensus also to be he is, in fact, of his right mind. This is just how his mind works. And as someone who has, again, literally strangled people to death with his own bare hands, it's a little hard for most people to understand what he's thinking and where he's going. I am going to check the live chat and try to catch up with that. I think we hit everything in the rundown. It's a tremendous amount of information, and right now this is more of an info dump than a discussion or really getting into it. We still do plan on doing that, as I said, later tonight. But that column has forced us to go early with what we've got so that you guys know where it is. Again, we don't know what it means. We don't know what it means because he is saying he's willing to argue for peace, and at this point, he's got very real problems. So at least that part has worked. All right, I'm going to catch up with the live chat here for a sec. I appreciate everyone's patience. There's talk of DEF CON. I haven't even considered DEF CON. I don't know what the U.S. DEF CON is. And actually, DEF CON is greatly misunderstood. It does exist, but it is broken up into several different DEF CONs based on the branch of military and how close they are to any actual activities. So there is, to the best of my understanding, if I recall, there is no actual one national DEF CON number. There's an aggregate of different numbers in different areas, and you can sit there and say we're at DEF CON whatever, but that's actually kind of a misnomer and not accurate into how it's done. No, and my hope is everybody heard the audio. You should have heard the audio on what we just showed. We'll show the thermobaric bomb in a second, but again, what we've the way that works, it's basically one of the most destructive conventional weapons. Somebody did point this out. Yeah, it's very close to a nuclear weapon minus all the messy radiation. It's the conventional equivalent. It's as close as conventional weapons can come to it. Oh, yeah, we don't know. And that's a good point. That video, we are confident, reasonably confident that that video is accurate. What that is, we don't know. That could be an explosion of some kind of military facility. Seems unlikely. We've already seen an explosion of an oil pipeline, which was quite spectacular. But that detonation, so, okay, what creates the mushroom cloud? What creates a mushroom cloud is a number of interesting physics forces at work, but essentially what happens is you get so much heat so quickly that hot air rises. So it starts to go up, but it's rising inside essentially a funnel because air is a terrible conductor. So the air outside this funnel is not going up as quickly as air inside this funnel. So you get this huge column that's sucking things up out of the ground as this hot air just goes up, 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 but is kind of limited in how far it can expand because air is not a good conductor. All the debris, everything goes up, and then it finally sort of hits this pinnacle point where I believe it's pressure. Now I'm starting to sort of forget this. It's been a while. I haven't had to cover this kind of stuff in a long time. But it starts to sort of mushroom cloud out as the temperature lowers as it gets higher up, and eventually it gets so that it's almost at a state of equilibrium, and it can start to punch through an insulating layer of air. It blows out like this, and you can get mushroom clouds on almost any explosion. It doesn't matter the size. It just has to be reasonably hot, and bring all of that heat up very, very rapidly. So you see a mushroom cloud. It's friggin' terrifying because we associate it with nuclear weapons. But you can see it on, you could generate a mushroom cloud with dynamite if you wanted to. So, but that mushroom cloud is a signature of a blast of that kind of heat, and they do generate. What happens is all that material heading up, it creates this huge suction because that air needs to be replaced. It's essentially, again, what we did in Dresden, the firestorm there, and the fact that this was producing a mushroom cloud suggests to me that it is, and I am not a weapons expert, not by any stretch. We're going to see if we can have Macmillan on tonight. He'll be able to identify that just by looking at it. But at this point, because of the unique nature of what that looked like, it does strike me as being the what they've been talking about deploying, at least what the understanding was they could and were intending to deploy, which is the thermobaric weapon, which is going to produce an effect like that because of the nature of how it works. It's the thermobaric. I mean, believe it or not, the biggest, most devastating part of this weapon is the sudden drop in pressure. That's what it's designed to do. And that drop in pressure comes from all of that material just going straight up. And all that, you're creating a vacuum directly under it and all around it, and the air is going to take time. There's friction involved. The air can't just suddenly go in, and you're going to kill a large number of people in a reasonably large area by the sudden drop in pressure, believe it or not. So, yeah, cute. At least that's my understanding. Again, I'm not an expert. No, Russia is not taking side. Russia's done both. Russia has said that they respect the sovereignty of every country, including Ukraine. They have called Ukraine friends and allies. However, they also say that Russia's complaints of NATO expansion being an existential threat have been ignored, that those are legitimate complaints. And so they basically said, we agree with everybody. We do believe that they're going to try to extort, they have two options at this point, and they have become a major player in this if they choose to be involved. They have basically two choices that we discussed. The first is make Russia pay through the nose to get around sanctions, which they can do. And since they are favored trading nation with the U.S., and since they hold so much U.S. debt, we are not going to sanction them, period, end of discussion. Trump sort of half tried that and lost. And that's not really on the table. So they can do that. The reality is, I'm not sure it's going to get them enough money to be worth it. What they may do is they still have contested areas with Russia. Now, these are areas that Russia probably wouldn't get into a war over, especially not now, and are reasonably sparse, and China could take if they want to. So China's got several options right now. The world is looking pretty good right now. If you're China, I don't know what they're going to do, and right now they have not indicated in any way. All right. Thank you. Yeah, these are basically the most powerful conventional, and we're gonna, like I said, please confirm that you guys had audio on that. Not that it's, I mean, it's mostly people in Russian being understandably rather worried. We'll play that clip at least one more time, but again, with the understanding that, you know, we are looking at it, and the one thing we are extremely confident of is it's not a nuclear detonation. Would know that very quickly. Background radiation would know that's not a nuclear detonation, so it isn't as scary as it looks. It is still very scary, and we've discussed how and why at this point. Yeah, we think it may be the hyperbaric attack, and if it is, that's an escalation, which Putin, at this point, we have been seeing some slowdown in the tempo. He has reframed that as, well, we're waiting for peace, but really, at this point, all sources seem to suggest that he can't keep up the tempo. He was not anticipating this, but if they're dropping this weapon, yeah, okay, there was audio, perfect. Yeah, the sword of Damocles on Putin is the thread is getting thinner and thinner, and he's aware of it. He's not stupid. He's not that unhinged from reality. All right, I'm gonna do one more check of everything on our end and make sure that we are up to date. I think we are. Like I said, we are going to cover this in a full show, but I mean, the amount of material that we have to cover is obviously very large, and this column has we decided to go with a breaking news to cover it. We're going to see. Oh, that's a good point. Yep, an EMP would have. Yeah, EMP would have. Yep, that's a very good point. Yeah, that's a duh, but yeah, that's yeah. Thank you. That was an excellent point. So. We're planning a show for tonight. Like I said, we want to cover as much of this in much more depth than we did here. This was an update because it looks like there are signs that this is escalating, and he's headed straight towards Kiev right now. We don't know. He's talked about peace. We'll see. The EU is committing a significant amount of money, like I said, about $1 billion worth at this point to help. So it's clear that this is really the rest of the world, while not engaging militarily, appears to, all but China, appears to be taking this as an all hands on deck situation, and it looks like it's starting to work. So with any luck, the pressure, I mean, the fact that there are violent protests in Russia is a hugely positive sign, because that's one of the things that's not even supposed to be possible in Russia. And Putin, that's the cornerstone of you know, Putin kills people. Everybody knows it. And right now, a lot of them aren't caring. Yes, we're going to carry the so-called babushka, offering sunflower seeds to Russian soldiers so that when they die, their bodies will have some benefit. And saying this right to a Russian, she's, yeah, these are some pretty brave people, because then the soldier asked her to move on before this escalates, and her response was, "You've invaded my country. How exactly is this going to escalate?" Oh, dear Lord, we'll have all that, but that's not really the purpose of this show. So I think everybody is up to date. Yep. Thank you, Titan. We're gonna the conversation's continuing in the Discord. Everything as we know it is being dropped in the Discord as it happens, and we're also just sort of crowdsourcing as much as possible what we know for air. And short of that, you guys are now basically as up to date as we are. So I would like to thank all of our supporters very much. Would like to thank, and again, I'd really like to thank everybody who's been helping. They deserve more thanks than if I spend as much time thanking them as they deserve. Would have to do 16 shows just on that. But I do want to make sure that gets said. We, like I said, show later tonight, and we'll hopefully get everybody up to date. Thank you very much for joining us, and yep. All right. Thank you very much. We will see you guys tonight.